with as much as we've talked about the issues with cashless bail and the criminal issues, and as much as it's being brought up in the current elections, and what we're doing to protect the accused and those people that may or may not have to stay in jail, most seem to be getting out often, and either repeating the crimes or hurting those that they were originally charged with the crime for. We thought it would be good to have a conversation with somebody that is on the other side of the fence. Someone who is out there to try and protect those people that have been the victims or the families of the victims of these crimes. So today we are going to have an interview with Patricia from Crime Survivors, and she's got some interesting points of view, and she's going to let us know some things that even I didn't understand about how some of the victims are treated, how they're not told about what's going on. And in many cases, as she brings up at one point that you'll hear, that it's not even their case when they're the victim, it's the state's case against the criminal, and they kind of need to do whatever the state decides to do. I think it's an interview you're going to enjoy. I think it's a interview that will hopefully, as we like to say, get you to think. I'm CJ Barnes, and this is Can I Make You Think? Hello, Patricia. Thank you for joining us today. One of the biggest questions that I've had from my listeners when I told them this was going to happen is, what is victims' rights? What do you consider are the biggest victims' rights? And what should we be doing to protect those rights and the survivors of criminal activities and crimes that are either enforced upon them or their family?
Well, thank you so much for having me on here today. I am just truly grateful for the opportunity to be able to share my voice, to also be a voice for the voiceless. We are in some struggling times right now. I got into this movement April 4th of 2002. My personal trainer drugged me and tried to kill me. I survived. I'm thriving. I'm a community leader giving back to our communities. But when I got into this movement, I thought it was challenging and difficult for victims, especially in my personal experience with the legal process. But I must say, in 2022, it's actually worse now than I've ever witnessed or seen it. And you ask, what are victims' rights? It really, I think, really depends on what city, county, state that you reside in. When I got into this movement, I was basically told, the offender and the criminal has all the rights and victims have no rights. And now, thankfully, at least in the state of California, we passed Marcys Law back in 2008.
And excuse me, but can you what is Marcys Law?
Yeah, so Marcys Law has 17 rights. So it gives victims 17 rights under the law. And it's been passed now, I want to say in 14 to 16 other states, but I think it's always different in each individual state. So what we have here in the state of California is 17 rights, things like to be treated with fairness and respect, which you would think that you wouldn't have to put that in a right, but that's actually written into Marcys Law. To be reasonably protected from the defendant and the persons acting on behalf of the defendant, to have the safety of the victim and the victim's family considered in fixing the amount of bail and release conditions for the defendant, which to me is actually become kind of a joke in a sense, because they're taking away bail continuously, or they're trying to take away bail. And victims and survivors and leaders like myself, we want bail because we feel like we need to have that offender held responsible to show up to court, to be able to give the victim some safety. That's why it was actually written in as number 3 of Marcys Law here in the state of California. But a lot of our elected officials, a lot of individuals want to take away bail. And to me, shame on them, because if they take away bail, do you think that offender, that criminal, is going to show up to their court proceeding or their court hearing? Highly doubtful. So that's one of the things that's out there.
Excuse me real quick. Has California gone into cashless bail anywhere like they have in many other states?
I think that some places they don't have at all cash bail. Some people are being released within 12 hours. Some people are not even being arrested or charged. They're not, so they don't even have to make bail because they're just given a citation. You know, if you follow the laws here in California, things like AB 109, Proposition 47, Proposition 57, it's really taken away the rights of the victims, even under Marcy's Law, and it's kind of given it all to the offenders and the criminals, where interesting enough, they're actually considering the offenders and criminals more of the victim than the actual innocent victim.
And how do you say that?
You know, I don't like it. I
No, no,
feel
no. I not that you like it, but what do you mean by they're actually considering the victims more of the criminals than the criminals?
Yeah, I think it's the narrative that's out there. You know, there's a lot of organizations that are working for the offenders and the criminals, and they're saying they're victims of the system, or they were victims when they were children, and that's why they went on and to commit these crimes. So basically, they are victims and survivors. And it's sad because that narrative has changed the way individuals even think about victims and survivors. And I now have to say, which I don't like having to say, innocent victims and innocent survivors. But there's many individuals like myself and many of the victims and survivors that we help. They didn't wake up in the morning saying, I want to be victimized today. They didn't go and they weren't holding a handgun pointing it at law enforcement or a store clerk. They didn't go and rob a store or do anything to cause themselves to be a victim or a survivor. And so they were innocently victimized by no fault of their own. And so I think we need to switch that narrative back to hold those offenders and criminals accountable within our system, make sure that bail is set for all offenders and criminals, holding them accountable. I do believe in rehabilitation, don't get me wrong. I do believe in second chances and 77 chances, with the exception of two. Intentional murder and molestation of a child, I do not believe that you can be rehabilitated.
Okay. What would you say to someone that would ask the question, well, the Constitution lays out what the rights are, and with the exception of basically that person should be held with a reasonable bail, that the Constitution specifically doesn't have a lot of victims' rights in it. It's really the rights of the accused. Are you looking to change the Constitution? Are you just trying to get more Marcy's laws out there or the equivalent thereof? And not wanting to hit the point too hard after what you went through, but the flip side of that is, how do you hope to deal with I don't know that I could quote the percentage, but approximately half the women out there that are sexually assaulted to one extreme or another that even refuse to report it?
Yeah, you know, I think first and foremost, I want to thank Dr. Henry T. Nicholas for putting his money and his voice in order to be able to get Marcy's Law passed. If it wasn't for him and his financial contribution and his voice, we wouldn't have Marcy's Law in the state of California, along with mothers of murdered children, individuals, family members, community members of all different crimes, really stepping up to the plate to use their voice, to be a voice for themselves as well as a voice for the voiceless. But I want to really acknowledge him because he is going state to state right now in order to get Marcy's Law passed, in order to be able to put it into the Constitution. I think that is the reason why he's doing that, and I applaud and recognize him because I know it's a huge undertaking and a battle in order to make that happen. And, many victims with this climate and with this narrative, with or without rights, because of what's been happening with the defund police movement, with the attacking of victims and survivors, many victims are not coming forward. And it's really sad to see and witness day in and day out. And that's why we're coming forward to be able to be their voice. it's why this campaign that we're working on can make all the difference to allow individuals to be their own voice or to be their voice for a loved one, to be able to speak up. Because what I believe is no matter what happens through the criminal court proceedings, through the legal process, which I feel is out of control right now because I don't feel many victims are going to get justice. But I feel as if victims and survivors and family members take back their voice and be able to report, to be able to come forward, no matter what happens through the legal system, because that's taking back your control from the one that attacked or brutalized or victimized or traumatized or murdered your loved one. You take back the control from them that they should not have in the first place.
And what kind of resources is Crime Survivors providing to those people?
So really depends. You know, we help all victims of violent crime, whether it's families of murder, survivors of attempted murder, rape, domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, elder abuse, and human trafficking. And I always feel that it's not my place to tell a victim what I can help them with. I want to be able to listen and hear what they need, because there are no two victims alike, no matter what the crime is. So
Absolutely.
whether it's therapy and counseling, whether it's relocation, whether it's getting them connected with a great victim assistance advocate, whether it's connecting them with the Family Justice Center or resource centers, whether it's, again, like I said, whether it's help with relocation, self-defense and safety classes, diapers and wipes for their babies, food, clothing. We want to be able to guide them to be able to have hope, to be able to heal, to survive, to thrive, to be a warrior and a voice of their own. Many victims, when you're victimized, you're no longer the same person that you were before the trauma, but it doesn't mean that you can't be better after the victimization and trauma. So we're there to kind of walk side by side with them, to guide them, to help them, to support them, whether it be the first 24 hours or it could be 16 years down the road.
Okay. And how do they reach you?
So anyone can reach out to us by calling our toll-free number, which is 844-853-HOPE 4673. Those are the numbers. They can contact us at info@crimesurvivors.org. They can also contact us at crimesurvivors.org, which is our website. I would also highly recommend and suggest that they go to this new website, which is a new campaign, Be Their Voice, which is crimesurvivorsbetheirvoice.com. Go onto this site, be able to launch your voice, to be able to share your photo, your image, your story, your real life happenings, as I say, with the community, to let them know that we've had kind of enough and we want to be able to balance the scales of justice.
Okay, and then are you dealing strictly with the items that you brought up? Are you helping, let's say this was a worker in one of these stores that gets, we see it on TV in San Francisco. So they technically may not have been a direct victim, but psychologically they can go through a lot after being in a store that was robbed. Are you able to, are you willing to help those people? Are you sticking strictly with direct victims and or their family members?
For us, I always say, somebody that's working in a 7-Eleven and somebody comes in there and robs them and steals stuff from the store, those individuals, those store clerks, those workers in there, they're victims of crime. The individuals that was just going in there to maybe get a candy bar or a bag of potato chips and somebody's pointing a gun at them, those individuals are victims. The person that goes into a local JCPenney's or Target or Walmart and starts robbing and stealing, those individuals that are in the store, to me, those individuals are victims of crime, and we want to be able to be there to help them, to support them, to guide them, and do all that we can, including the individuals that own those businesses. Those businesses are drastically affected, whether they're corporations, whether they're private, whether they're small mom and pop shops. They need help and support as well. Now, can we replace their financial means to be able to replace the things that were stolen? No, but we do know that insurance does help with that. But we are there to also help with the mental, the physical, and the emotional for them to be able to move forward, to be able to live their lives healthy and productive moving forward.
Okay. And what about are you connected with, because you had mentioned relocation, when we're talking about wives that have been abused, that are, I don't know a better word for it, running from their abuser, who may be boyfriend, husband, and they have children. Are you connected with some of those places that can help those women get out, get away, get to someplace safe?
Absolutely. You know, we work very closely with law enforcement. We work very closely with the rape crisis centers. We work very closely with domestic violence shelters. We work very closely with human trafficking task force. We work with the elderly as well. So again, whether you're a victim of a crime and you need to get out, I want you to know that you're not alone, whether it's through our organization, whether it's through the many other organizations out there, whether it's through law enforcement, whether it's through therapists, hospitals, clinics. There's a lot of help and support, but many victims, like you mentioned, that are trying to get out of an abusive situation with their children, or they may be single by themselves. Many of them are beaten down so bad they don't know. They don't know that there's help and support, whether that be for hotel vouchers, whether that be for clothing, whether that be for food, whether it's help getting them medical care and assistance. There's a lot of help and support out here. And so for victims and survivors listening, please know you're not alone. Please reach out to us or to a local nonprofit in your area, whether, again, that be a family justice center, a rape crisis center, a resource center. Reach out to the Victim Assistance Program, the district attorney's offices. There is a lot of help and support, and don't let the failed criminal justice system or that reform that's out there scare you. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to receive it and accept it, to be able to break the cycles of victimization and trauma.
Okay. You brought up the failed justice system a number of times. What do you think the cause of that failure is?
You know, I think a lot of it has to do with possibly George Soros and his connection of people and finances. I feel like there's a narrative out there that people on one side don't want incarceration. They don't believe in prisons. They don't believe in jails. I think that has a lot to do with it. Listen, I'm not an expert at anything. I'm a survivor. I'm a thriver. I'm just
That
trying to
makes you an
help
expert.
them. Well, thank you. That's true. But for me, witnessing and seeing it day in and day out, this narrative, I don't understand it. I can't relate to it. I think we should all come to the table and try to find a way to balance the scales of justice. But in my opinion, each and every day I see something come across my desk that seems to be getting worse and worse for victims and survivors.
And do you feel that it's likely to change? Are you feeling that it's not going to change? Are the elections going to help? Or is it people? I mean, there is a feeling, and I'll be honest, I truly believe there are probably, and I'm old school, borderline federalist, where I would rather see 10 people go free than put one innocent person in jail. And there's a feeling among a number of my listeners, including myself, that there are a lot of people that get railroaded into jail because they don't have the money to fight it. And I, knowing that in my heart, but also knowing I don't want the victim of a crime like what you went through, or, somebody who works at a 7-Eleven, or even friends of mine that have had their houses robbed or their cars stolen or whatever else. I don't like that either. So do you feel that there is a point where we can stop swinging the pendulum from one extreme to the other and maybe find something middle of the road, that we need to acknowledge the victims, but we also need to acknowledge that the system may also be broken on the other side? Or are you feeling that we've gone too far right now and we need to get it back first?
That's a really good point that you bring up, because it does swing back and forth. It goes back and forth. The problem that I've witnessed in my lifetime, it goes way too far one way or way too far another way, and it doesn't go one way or the other. It's just too much. And I would hope in my lifetime that we could all come to the table. Like I always say, we don't have to like each other, but we don't have to agree on everything, but we could come to the table to make it a better system, maybe not for our lifetime, but for the future generation. So maybe if we did say, listen, I know there's a lot of people in prison, a lot of people in jail that I don't think should be there. I think there's better programming. I think there's better opportunities to be able to help them, to maybe break cycles or to heal or to go through the process. What I do have a problem with is trying to put everybody in together as a whole when you're talking about someone that's maybe into drugs or alcohol or have addiction problems versus equally putting someone that has murdered someone or raped someone or sexually assaulted someone. I don't think they go together in the same equally. You have to be able to protect our victims and survivors and our community, because you start releasing individuals and then that's because we now have more victims because we're not helping people correctly.
Right. But I guess and maybe I'm not phrasing it well, do you think that in the current political climate, in the current climate of there seems to be two extremes and very little, if anything, left in the middle, that conversation's ever going to happen? I just, not trying to be negative. Well, in some ways, I guess I am being slightly negative. There are so many things that I think most of us that live in the real world believe that if we could just talk to each other, we could probably solve a lot of these issues, even people that disagree. But right now, if people disagree, it's a fight. I mean, college campuses were the birth of the freedom of speech movement, and now if you don't speak what the campus wants to hear, it's no longer you can. I grew up under the old saying of, I may not like what you say, I may disagree with what you say, but with my life I'll defend your right to say it. Doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And do you think that what you're doing, are you only going to get heard by one side, or do you honestly believe there's a chance that we'll bring the two sides together and at least have a conversation? Because that has to happen before anything else. Or is that not your focus? You're really more focused on the actual victim.
No, I'm focused on awareness, prevention, advocacy, and healing. Healing being the most important one. And I am a true believer in agreeing to disagree with respect. You don't have to agree with me, and I don't have to agree with you, but I don't have to be disrespectful or mean or hatred filled. But I do believe and agree with you that we have gone way too far right now, because people can't agree to disagree with respect. If you say something, they are coming for you strong, and they are hatred filled, in all honesty. I've witnessed it. It breaks my heart to see it, to live it, to feel it. And I don't understand it, and I never will. People say, oh, Patricia, you're so naive. You're just like, you can't be full of hope and faith anymore. That's not realistic. And I will die trying.
Don't give up on faith and hope. Those are good things.
Yeah, well, with faith, there is hope. And to me, that's what I live on every day. I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for my faith and without living with hope each and every day, because there's days I don't want to get out of bed when I think about our failed systems. But listen, I keep getting up, and I may be doubtful that we could come to the table together, but I'm also hopeful. So doubtful and hopeful, I guess, right now, because that's what I have to live on, to think in order to make it better for my child or my grandchildren or their children moving forward. There has to be something that we can do to make it better for public safety and better for families.
And then what about, you've got a website, email address. Are you or any of your victims suffering the new internet term doxing? Are people coming after you because the other side of that coin is, cashless bail, let them out, we're being too harsh on everybody? Are they trying to shut you down? Are there people that are giving you that grief, or have you been able to avoid that?
Well, there's another organization that has stolen our name and taken our name, and they help the offenders and the criminals, and maybe some of them are victims and survivors too, or they were, and then they commit crimes. So, that's been a battle. That's another narrative that happens out there, and it's a fight, and it's It's challenging and it's difficult. And, for me, I have to, and again, maybe I'm naive and maybe I'm wrong and I don't know, but for me, each and every day, I got into this movement because I feel like God called me and gave me a calling. First and foremost, I was able to survive, which a lot of victims don't survive that went through what I went through. And so for me, as long as God continues to call me, I'll continue to do what I'm doing. And when that call is up and I don't have my breath anymore, then the fight is over and the other individuals can go ahead and take it over. But I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to do my best for our community. And to, again, be their voice, be my voice, be our community's voice. Because, like I said, we can reform our system on a national platform or a local platform. But I do believe that we need to be able to look at all sides. And we need to focus. We need to focus on fairness, and we need to be able to have a justice system that's going to protect the offender and the criminal, but also protect the victim and the survivors.
And last, I guess the last question I would ask, because it's come up a number of times here in Texas, and I believe you've had that problem out in LA County, where some of the local state's attorneys have decided that they're not notifying the victim when the convicted is coming up for parole. Is that what I understand is happening? Have you heard of that happening in California?
I have heard about so much recently that it's shocking, and whether it's Texas, whether it's Florida, whether it's Illinois, whether it's California, it goes back to what I originally said. How do we not include the victim or the survivor in the legal process, whether that be during the hearing, whether that be during the trial, whether that be during the parole? And things have changed drastically. And again, it's this movement that's happening because one side has so much financial means to be able to change a system to direct that narrative. Now, they would say, I remember the district attorney saying to me, Patricia, this is not your case. This is the state of California's case. You're just the victim in the case. And I remember that bothering me so much. Like, wait a minute. The state of California didn't have saran wrap wrapped around its face and almost suffocated to death. I did. So how can this not be part of my case or my justice that I should be getting? Mm-hmm. So to me, I would say to the parole board, I would say to district attorneys, I would say to law enforcement, I would say to anybody that's making a narrative, include the victim and the survivor, notify them, because I always reflect back also on why we have Marcys Law in the first place was because Marcella Leach, Marcy's mother, was going into a grocery store to get a gallon of milk and some bread, and she crossed the murderer that killed her daughter in the grocery store. And that's one of the main reasons she was so outspoken to say, I should have been notified that he was going to be released. I should have been included during the whole process. So I bring it back to that because I want to be able to say that victims have their voice. We need to be their voice, and we need to be able to have victims' rights to protect victims, survivors, and family members.
And I know that you've got people that are working around the states. I just have to ask, as you mentioned Illinois, have you heard of anything about the new, I believe they call it the Safety Act, that basically they eliminated cash bail, crimes like trespassing, which to me is usually where a lot of the intimidation of from one side to the other starts to happen. They can't even remove the person from the property anymore. All they can do is write them a ticket. Have you guys have you heard about any of that?
I have. I have learned.
It has to be a little frustrating with what you're doing. That seems like they're going in the absolute wrong direction.
We are absolutely going in the wrong direction. Like I said, I grew up in Illinois, so when
so
there you have it. So when you think about growing up there, and you think about it's how did we get to a place to where people are feeling that you don't have rights anymore. You don't have a right to protect your property, or you can't be safe anymore. You don't know if somebody's going to trespass or somebody's going to break in, and then to be told that person's not getting cited, that person's not going to jail, that person's nothing. You know, I remember when my grandmother would say to me, you know, you can't go to the store and take one grape or a piece of bubble gum because that's stealing. You can't do that. And if you did do it, there was going to be punishment. There was going to be something. I reflect back to that a lot, and I think to myself, there is no punishment or consequences anymore. So when a child can take a grape or a bubble gum, then they can take a book, they can take a TV, they can take a car, they can rob whoever they want, they can do whatever they want. Where's the consequences and accountability? Where is justice at? What happened to that?
Depending on what state you're in, anywhere from $500 to $1,500.
Right? Or you can go into the Home Depot and you can take $800, $850 worth of the tools, whatever you
Right.
want, and roll your cart out, and really basically nothing happens to you. And
Yeah.
to me, that's devastating for our system, for our communities, for our children, for our families. So it's time to speak up. It is enough is enough. And I think balancing the scales of justice is a healthier place to be.
Okay. Well, once again, would you give us how we can contact you? And then do you guys accept donations? How are you supported? How is your group that is going around to different states supported? If you want to tell us all that.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up, because it is a struggle to be able to get donations. And, you know, we look for all types of donation, whether it's financial, monetary, in-kind donations as well. You know, and we need all the help that we can get, because it is a struggle and a battle. So you can reach out to crime survivors and the Crime Survivors Resource Center. You can go to crimesurvivors.org. You can call 844-853-HOPE, which is 4673. You can email info@crimesurvivors.org. But really, I'd like you to go on to Be Their Voice. It's a new campaign which gives victims and survivors and their loved ones an opportunity to stand up, be counted, and share their personal stories through its website, which is crimesurvivorsbetheirvoice.com. So I'd like all of you, if you've been a victim of a crime, whether it be in Texas, California, Illinois, Florida, Colorado, Utah, wherever you're at, please go on to that website and share your voice. Or if you have a loved one that's been murdered, please be able to share their voice as well, and get involved, because you can make a difference and an impact in your community, one person, one family, and one community at a time.
That sounds great. And just so everybody knows, we will put this at the bottom of our description of this episode. I'm sure Patricia can get us that information, and we'll copy it and paste it into the episode description so that y'all have it in case you didn't write fast enough. If there was one last thing you could say to people listening out there that kind of float in the middle and aren't really one way or the other, what would you like to say to them?
I would like people to know that I would never want you to walk the journey that I walked as a victim or a survivor, or the thousands of victims that we helped. So I don't expect you to know what that's like if you've not been a victim of a crime. I would not wish that upon you at all. But pay attention, because it could happen to you. It happened to me. It happened to the victims we're helping. It can happen to anybody. And if you have been a victim or a survivor, I want you to know that you're not alone. It's not your fault what you went through, that there is hope for healing. And for myself personally, just please keep track of knowing that with faith there is hope, and that you matter. Victims matter. So never forget that.
And we will hopefully not do that. And that's part of why we do this interview. Patricia, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. This whole show is about getting people to think about things. Hopefully we've got them to think about this a little bit. Like I said, our show has gone pretty heavily talking about the cashless bail system and the repeat offenders and some of that stuff. Kind of nice to have somebody from the other side talk about some of the good things that can be done to help those that have been hurt. So I appreciate it very much. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you very much.
As always, I hope you all enjoyed our conversation. I truly hope it got you to think a little bit about not just what cashless bail can do, not that we know our system's screwed up, but that every time a crime happens, there's not only a criminal, but there's also a victim. And while we need to treat the criminal fairly and make sure they're getting true justice and that they're being treated appropriately, that we're also treating the victim appropriately and protecting the victim and getting the victim what they need to get through the situation. Because it's not just about putting someone in jail. First, it's about putting the right person into the right consequences, because jail isn't always the right consequence. But it's also about helping the person who was hurt, the victim, the survivor, to get through it, to move on with their life, and to hopefully go back to being a productive citizen. So the general hope here is that we're helping two people, not only the convicted, but also the victim. Again, this is CJ Barnes. I hope you enjoyed our show. You can always reach me at Can I Make You Think at CIMYTHINK.com. Again, as always, CIMYTHINK at Outlook.com. I think I forgot to say that the first time. So it's again CIMYTHINK at Outlook.com. Have a great day. Remember, tomorrow is the day to vote. If you're listening to this before the Tuesday, if you're listening to it on Tuesday, get out and vote. And if you're listening to it after Tuesday, I hope you got out and voted. Until next week, this is CJ Barnes. I hope you're thinking about it, because let's face it, if we're not thinking, it's all over. Have a great week, folks.